Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Rick Barron, the Executive Vice Chancellor for Health Affairs and the Executive Director of the NextGen Precision Health Initiative. Thank you for joining today's NextGen Precision Health Discovery Series. As you know, these discussions are intended to highlight critical precision health topics and approaches. We ask our speakers to share their knowledge in ways that engage all of us to spark new ideas, explore collaboration potentials, and highlight additional areas for NextGen research. As you listen today, we would like each of you to think about research opportunities in precision health and where you can contribute and where you can help identify potential collaborations across the University of Missouri system. It's my pleasure today to introduce our speaker, Dr. Giovanna Guidoboni. Dr. Guidoboni is an Associate Dean of Research in the College of Engineering and a professor with joint appointments in electrical engineering and computer science and mathematics. Her research focuses on mathematical modeling and data science applied to engineering and life sciences. Dr. Guidoboni collaborates with colleagues across campus, nationally and internationally, in areas such as ocular blood flow and risk factors associated with ocular disease, non-invasive health monitoring, and plant physiology. She is currently providing mathematical modeling for research on organ function and on COVID-19 with a number of School of Medicine faculty. Dr. Guidoboni has a PhD in mathematics and a MS in engineering of materials from the University of Ferrara in Italy. I asked Dr. Guidoboni today to focus on how, from an engineering perspective, on how we can approach precision health today. In this talk, she will share how engineers are contributing to precision health research by analyzing and interpreting medical images, developing home sensors, and how we can monitor disease conditions, and analyzing big data to connect the wide spectrum of information available for a single patient. And with that, I will turn it over to Dr. Guidoboni. Welcome, Giovanna, and thank you.
Thank you for the nice introduction, and it is an honor for me to be here and to give this talk. I'm now sharing the screen, and with this, I will lead you into what we see as engineering precision health. I'll begin with my disclosures for clarity. I actually I have a consulting company, and I serve as a consultant for Foresight Healthcare, and I also am the co-founder, co-editor-in-chief and managing editor for an interdisciplinary journal titled Modeling and Artificial Intelligence in Ophthalmology. However, none of these disclosures represent a conflict with what I'm going to say today. Okay, so engineering precision health. What is precision health? So this is actually taken from the website of NextGen PHI. So in a nutshell, I think of precision health as the opposite of one size fits all. So basically, we focus on individuals and populations and all the individualized factors that influence the diagnosis, the treatment, or the care for patients suffering for different diseases. This is really a broad spectrum. This brings really a broad spectrum of activities and efforts, because we are talking about the differences among individuals and populations of disease processes. For example, there are some diseases that are accompanied by changes in age, some diseases that affect more young adults or older adults. There are differences in ways in which we can diagnose such diseases, because, for example, there are some diagnostic techniques that can be utilized again for older adults, but not for example, premature babies. Differences in treatments, as well as differences in the way we can monitor the progress of the disease or the effect that a treatment has on patients. And ultimately, any of these stages must be then analyzed in ways that is useful and usable for the end users. And what I hope I will be able to convey today is that really engineering is pervasive across all these aspects of precision health. And this is what I mean by engineering precision health. So a little bit of, basic understanding. So what about this connection between engineering and medicine? This is something that I often also show to my students. So when we think of a building, there are many structures. So for example, there are the walls and the roof. They are made to actually sustain, the load that is on the house. Similarly, in our body, we have the skeleton that helps maintain the shape of the body and protect all the internal organs. In the house, we have different pipings, for example, for cold water, hot water, wastewater. And similarly, in our body, we have different vessels, for example, bringing oxygenated blood or the waste of the respiration and the nutrients. So there are really many similarities, but how can approaches in engineering be helpful in medicine and vice versa? So let us put the engineering hat for a moment. And imagine that in the house, for example, there is a problem with the pump that is not pumping up water at the second floor. So what are the engineering tools that we use? We are all taught in our engineering classes the fundamental principles of physics, that basically water runs through the pipes if there is a pressure difference actually pushing it. And of course, it depends also on the content of water and so on. Then, thanks to experiments that we may run in the lab or mathematical models that we can use to actually translate these concepts into formulas, we can actually then compute, for example, the number of the power that our pump needs in order to actually meet the needs of pumping water where we need to. So how is this relatable to medicine? So as I said, there are many similarities. And of course, there is even more because our body is alive. And so in addition to the fundamental principles of physics and chemistry, we also have the fact that, for example, all the vessels in our body can also react actively to changes in the conditions. And so, for example, we may have arterioles that dilate or constrict in order to meet the metabolic demand of the tissue. And in addition to experiments that we can run in the lab and the methods for quantitative analysis from mathematics and statistics, we also have other possibilities to test our approaches. And they include, for example, preclinical models or clinical studies. And so it is in this perspective that I would like to present the partnership between engineering and medicine today. Even though this is not the whole story, it is truly only part of the story, because there is so much more. There is actually not only the fact that engineering can help develop precision health, but also many concepts that are there in physiology and anatomy that really inspire new methods in engineering too. For example, biomimetic, also called biomimicry. It is a whole field where, for example, we can design self-healing structures or brain-inspired computing and so on. But this would be for another talk. So today we focus about engineering and medicine. So I start with a very simple example. I'm sure that in some classes, you all have heard about the center of mass. And if nothing else, you may have played with the fork on the edge of a plate, for example, to find the balance point. There is a reason why I am describing this. So let us consider these two objects, and they have the same mass. They are connected by a rigid bar that is homogeneous. And so if we put the support here, this gray rectangle right in the middle, the system will be balanced. Why is that? Because actually we are placing the support exactly at the center of mass, also called balance point, which is that hypothetical point where you can imagine all the mass of the system to be actually concentrated. What if you have the case in which one mass is much larger than the other? Well, of course, the system will change position. And in order to have your beam properly horizontal, you will have to move your support, which actually is saying that the center of mass has moved because the mass of the system is distributed in a different way. So this is, of course, well known in engineering. And an example of why this is important is, for example, the design of aircrafts, in which it is very important that the center of mass of the aircraft lies in a certain safe area in order for it to fly properly. But why should this matter for medicine? Okay, so now imagine that you have a lot of masses that move around. And so you will have your center of mass that will move around dynamically too. So can you imagine of something that moves around continuously and dynamically in our body? So we have a pump, as you all know, and pushes blood around. And believe it or not, our center of mass moves at every heartbeat, and with a motion that is actually detectable if you put sensors around, let's say, not only on the person, but even just in objects that are in contact with the person, for example, in the bed. And based on this basic physical principle, meaning that the center of mass moves dynamically where the mass inside the system is redistributed in space, then we can develop engineering ways, or we can engineer ways to actually sense this motion. And these are some examples. For on the right, you can see a bed sensor that basically is composed of 4 hydraulic sensors that are placed under the mattress. Here you can see load cells that are basically positioned under the bed posts. And so, for example, so in both of these solutions, the person would lie on the bed with nothing attached directly to the body. It is the bed, in a sense, that is engineered to sense this motion. And an example of the tracings that you can get this way is provided below. And you can see that there are actually 2 frequencies here. You have the heart rate here highlighted in green, and the respiration rate, which is on a slower time scale. And both of them can be captured, again, non-invasively and not in contact with the person, leveraging these fundamental principles. Okay. I would like to draw you back to the schematic that we had before about how precision health is actually composed of many aspects, and monitoring or sensing of physiological signals, that is what I just discussed, is just one of them. I want to emphasize that there are, in addition to the physical principle of how we sense the physiological signals, we also have to take into account the human factor. Like, for example, older adults who may have to be monitored for a longer period of time may really want to prefer solutions for which they don't have to do anything. So, for example, the placement in the bed may be a very good solution for them. Also because actually the compliance to actually utilize certain detection systems is very important to actually guaranteeing continuous monitoring. For other alternatives could also be wearable devices, which may also be more suitable for a different segment of the population. So this is what I meant by precision health also in the monitoring side, with the idea that we should consider monitoring solutions that are tailored to the needs of the individuals or the segments of the populations, rather than thinking that one size would fit all. I would like to recognize Marjorie Skubik and Marilyn Ranth for the work that they initiated in the area, and all the faculty and students and fellows who participated to the development of all these sensors within the Center for Elder Care and Rehabilitation Technology. These sensors positioned on the bed are just one example of those that they have developed for non-invasive monitoring of health in the home. And they include, for example, depth sensor and radars to monitor, for example, the gait and how it changes and how it may pose a risk for falls. So let us move to the other aspects of precision health then. So what I was showing you in the slide was here circled in yellow. That is actually the possibility of monitoring and so conducting studies for people in the home. However, I think that one of the unique opportunities that we have here at the University of Missouri is that we can conduct a broad variety of studies. So for example, you see here below a picture of our colleague Riccardo Sacco from the Politecnico di Milano, who actually while developing the mathematical models with us, he also participated in the data collection in the lab, where this signal is actually acquired with a bed suspended to the ceiling. So this is a very reliable signal for this displacement of the center of mass of the human body. But as you can imagine, this is a sensing device that makes sense in the lab, but certainly not in the homes. Thanks to the capabilities that we have at the University of Missouri, we can also then test on preclinical models of cardiovascular diseases how the signal is going to change. In particular, here I am showing data that have been acquired in the lab of Dr. Craig Emter, and these data are acquired by positioning a sensor under the neck of swine, which is a preclinical model for cardiovascular disease. In particular here, we are talking about myocardial infarction. And this possibility of conducting studies on large animals is particularly important since their cardiovascular system is extremely similar to that of humans. And so what do we see here? You see these dashed vertical lines. These are actually the positions in time of the R peaks from the electrocardiogram. The blue curves are actually the signal that is acquired based on the displacement of the center of mass. And you see circled in red the positions of the peak of this signal, which is actually called ballistocardiogram, so BCG. So what do we see? Many things change before and after infarction. In particular, you see that the heart rate has changed because the distance between these dashed vertical lines is different. Also, if you look at the time delay between the dashed vertical lines and the circles has actually increased post-infarction. And the overall amplitude of the signal has decreased. Here we were around 1 times 10 to the 5th, and here it is almost half of that. So why is this important? Because so far, these kind of signals have been used mostly to detect heart rate and respiration rate. In order to have a rate, you just need to have a periodic signal and count the peaks. Here we are talking about something much deeper, meaning the possibility of actually detecting cardiovascular changes by placing something under the pillow or beneath the bed. And what is this something? So in particular, we have shown based on a mathematical model of cardiovascular function that actually these are the changes in the waveform that you should expect when you have a decrease in the ventricular contractility. So how does this help moving forward precision health? Again, thanks to the great connections among the different schools here on campus, we are also conducting studies in the surgical intensive care unit directed by Dr. Salman Ahmad. In this case, this device is positioned under the pillow of critically ill patients. And we have tested the same data acquisition on the same hospital bed, also on a healthy subject. And so here, I would like to show you the differences that are very similar to those that we saw before pre and post MI. So again, here the dashed vertical lines are the positions of the R peaks, and the curve is what we call ballistocardiogram. So here you see in the green and the red circles, basically the main complex of this signal, and you see how in the healthy subject is much closer to the position of the R peak, whereas in the case of the ill patient, you see that it is much more delayed. So why is this important? Because basically we have leveraged data that we have acquired in the lab in a controlled setting to then test our hypothesis on how the signal would change on preclinical models, and then test that actually this can be perform reliably as a measurement, even in situations that are absolutely not controlled, such as in the intensive care unit, and that the trend in the signal supports the findings based on a cardiovascular interpretation of the changes. Are we done? Not yet, because we ultimately, out of this signal, we need to get informations that are usable and that are useful to the people who receive it. And who are the people who receive it? They are the patient, the family members, the healthcare providers, the clinicians. And so depending on the audience that you would like to communicate your answers to, your findings to, you have to communicate that in a different way. So here you can see just some examples of visualization and communication tools that have been developed by the group, leveraging Amazon Echo Show to summarize the results extracted from the signals and the waveforms you have seen before. So it is amazing how many people have contributed to different aspects of this project. This project started almost 20 years ago. And so here you see people who spent some of their time at Mizzou, some recently joined Mizzou, some have been here the whole time. And you see how many schools are represented and have contributed to the different aspects of this project. Of course, what is not listed here are all the students and fellows who contributed. The fact that this research has been supported by several external agencies, and in addition has generated IPs and products that have been commercialized. I think that this is a great example of what really NextGen can bring together in our campus, being a hub and a catalyzer for a groundbreaking research that really spans across all disciplines. And it is really when we converge and we bring our expertise together that we can really have an impact from the basic science down and back to the people who will actually benefit from it. So this is just an example of how engineering can help precision medicine, but this is, of course, not the end of the story. So there are in NextGen many faculty who also have joint appointments in engineering, and I would like to acknowledge them in these slides, and that cover basically various aspects of that precision health that I mentioned earlier. So Diana and Adam, they are focused on the essence of the disease processes, focusing on the immune response of lymphocytes, for example, as well as on the immunology of T cells. We have recently hired a great faculty in imaging who will leverage the equipment that we have in NextGen, for example, the 7 Tesla MRI, the MR spectroscopy, to actually provide amazing tools to monitor diseases related to age, Alzheimer, as well as cardiovascular diseases. And also develop new methods to actually analyze the data and extract information from them. And then the side of data analytics. Jingyang and Dong, they are experts in machine learning, artificial intelligence, bioinformatics, and their studies are focused on protein structure and function, the genome structure, and the whole spectrum till developing also mobile apps for tracking healthcare. And more on data analysis. For example, image processing is a very important aspect of delivering accurate and effective healthcare monitoring, because from the image, you really want to understand and recognize where the potential problems are. And it is interesting how you can actually bridge methods that are developed, for example, for geospatial intelligence, and you can apply it to MRI images, for example. Other important aspects are also high performance computing and cloud computing, and how we keep secure all the information that we store. In addition to that, we also want to take into account when we actually monitor the population, how are the different health parameters and health factors distributed across the population in space, for example, across the state, and how are the different resources affecting, for example, the health outcomes. So this is all expertise that our faculty bring together and actually can connect the expertise and tools that they have developed in other areas of engineering and computer science to actually benefit the research on precision health. And there is so much more. I am listing here just some of the more recent news that our office, our engineering college has broadcasted. For example, other faculties are developing methods to screen autism or to develop sensors that can be placed on the skin. And these are wearable sensors. For example, they can detect vital signs as well as, for example, skin hydration. Devices that can be deployed in the neonatal intensive care unit to monitor babies and hopefully provide better outcomes, targeted cancer treatment, and also neural engineering, and so basically developing computational models to better understand the brain function. And this is, again, not all the story. I would truly encourage you to go to our engineering research directory. Here you can find the link. We have put this together so that it would be an easy access to the diverse expertise that we have in our college. But I would like you to think not to stop there because for example, as I was showing you earlier, techniques that may be relevant for the design of aircrafts come down to be actually very important also for the design of sensors to monitor cardiovascular function. And maybe this was not obvious just looking at the directory. So I would encourage to look at this directory as a first step, but then please reach out to the faculty or to the associate deans. And I'm sure that we can find great ways together to develop new ideas. Research is not the end of the story. Education and training is a big part of what the Next Gen will represent for all of us. There is a big program on clinical engineering that will actually create or facilitate the development of a workforce that is actually needed to utilize more advanced methods for imaging. And this would be extremely important, especially in the rural areas across the United States. And we should not forget the student involvement. This is a big part, of course, of our university, the mission that we have, and all that they bring to the college, the university, their ideas. And I am convinced that by experiencing this extremely collaborative environment in Next Gen, they will actually create the new generation of scientists that will be able to bring together disciplines and overcome the barriers that have siloed collaborative research for a long time. And finally, I would like to recognize that the involvement of engineering is also in the building. We have more than 30 alumni who have contributed to the design and the building per se, 51 project personnel who attended at least one of the 4 universities of the system. We have engineering students who have worked as interns on the building. And we also have engineering alumni who contributed with donations to establish the building. So I thank you all for your attention. I really wanted this to be a talk where we could actually discuss on ways in which engineering can interact with all the various disciplines. And I'm really looking forward to hear all of your ideas. Thank you.
Thanks, Giovanna. That was a great overview. And I hope that some of the folks listening will ask questions, but let me just ask you, I mean, you really have been working with healthcare providers in a lot of different areas, and you're really good at that. You're really good at reaching out and connecting with people. So, but as we move forward, give me your thoughts, and maybe others may want to weigh in on this, on some ways you think that we can connect engineering faculty and students and healthcare faculty so that they, the healthcare faculty that are interested in a project, they may not understand how engineering can help them, and vice versa. The engineers may not know who out there on the healthcare faculty they could be working with. So as we're going to be launching some sort of next gen mixers, collision meetings after the first of the year. Should we have a thematic one where it's come meet your engineer, or I mean, give me some ideas on, and we'll be utilizing you as a leader in designing these mixers.
Well, thank you. Thank you for your nice words and the question. So first of all, I would like to say that it is very important that each of us is engaged in reaching out. So my experience, for example, when I started the project in ophthalmology, or when I joined Marge in this project on the monitoring of the cardiovascular system, these all came along because I was talking to faculty and to my colleagues, and other colleagues were talking to other faculty. So first of all, this is a call to all of us to really talk about what we do, reach out and use every opportunity we have to actually discuss. What you were suggesting, I think it is very important to have thematic mixers and to keep them pretty broad. But also in that case, you may have people who are interested, but they don't realize that actually they are doing something that is relevant to that area. And in particular here, I'm talking also to my engineering colleagues. So I think it is important that basically those who participate also act as ambassadors, creating further links after that. So this is really what I hope NextGen can do.
All right. Mary, I'm looking at 3 questions that are here that we want to give to Dr. Guidobani. Do you want to read them?
Sure. Yes, we've had some come in, and one, we had a private question that kind of matches up with one of these, which is, I think we have to train our students to have the fundamental knowledge to navigate these systems. And someone else had asked about, do you have, you mentioned students being so important in this process. And so they asked, do you have an established research undergrad internship program?
Yes, so training students is very important, and how to do that in such interdisciplinary areas is not easy anywhere. So first I talk about my personal experiences. So in my lab, I have 2 high school students, 1 undergraduate student, 2 PhDs, 2 master students, and a postdoc, and they are in different areas. So from pure math to computer science and so indeed they learn a lot about math and physiology and anatomy as they work on this research. But the question is, how do you go beyond just teaching them what they need for the research? So I personally believe that it would be great also if I don't know if that this could be facilitated by NextGen, but having some curricula or courses or certificates in which students can participate from different disciplines and actually study together. For example, cardiovascular physiology or fundamentals of physics, or with students from medicine and students from engineering. That is how you create really the new generation. So I have experienced that in a class that I taught about the fundamentals of modeling of continuous mechanics. And I had people from math and engineering and geology. And the fact that people see the material from different perspectives and they ask questions from different perspectives is really, really enriching for all of us. So I think that is a great question, and it is really something that we should work together for.
Right, thank you. This question, the different BCG traces, pre versus post cardiac injury, do you know if the post-injury trace ever returns to the healthy signature upon healing, or is the injury and the trace rather permanent?
And that's from your colleague, Dr. Schrum.
So thank you for the question. So these data are really fresh. So a few months ago, but actually our colleague Craig Emter, he is actually monitored, depending on the study, these animals after 3 months, after 6 months. And so we are also looking forward to see how the recovery look like. Also because different animals, depending on the study, may have been given different treatment. And so going back to basically this, yeah, I hope I don't mess it up. Okay, but this fundamental slide that I was talking about. So I see these components all together. So for example, indeed, to answer the question that was posed, you need to continue the monitoring before and after the treatment and for a certain period of time. And so also the way in which monitoring is performed should be something that is easy to deploy and easy to maintain and easy to analyze.
Great. Thank you very much. This next question asks, what barriers exist which keep or prevent doctors from communicating effectively with engineers?
So I never had a problem. So, but I never had a problem because I have no problem in saying that, you know, I don't understand or I don't know. Or so I give you an example. Of something that I did not talk about today, which is the work that I did on the modeling of ocular blood flow. So that came to be because a colleague of mine, when I was in Indianapolis, knew the director of the eye center, and then he organized a visit to the clinic. So this is what I was mentioning about the word of mouth and being open to connect with people. And so I never took a formal training in medicine at all. So my studies are in engineering and in mathematics. And so, but I would see all these images and they were so cool, and I hoped I could contribute. And so I basically was asking a lot of questions every week. So I know that it was difficult for my medical collaborator to see that basically there was a time that basically was dull, in a sense that we were just trying to understand each other's language without publications and without grants coming out for 1.5 years. And so that if you are on a short clock, that is a long time. So I think that one of the barriers is how do we balance, you know, the requirements for promotion and tenure and the quick clocks with the fact that actually to establish new interdisciplinary collaborations, there is a ramp time, a learning time that need to be acknowledged at all levels of the administration. This is my personal opinion. And then after that, if one has really the time to go deep, then it is really fun because, for example, with me not knowing anything, I was asking, for example, veins in the legs have valves. Do they have valves in the eye? And then they were like, well, I don't know. So then, because maybe it was not a question that was typical for them. And then they went and checked, and actually there was a recent paper at the time showing valves in the ophthalmic veins for the first time, because basically new technology came around, and so basically new knowledge was actually acquired. So the barriers, in my opinion, what I have experienced are the time that it takes if you really start something completely new. And so it is worth the effort only if you're really going after something that will make an impact. And of course, if you are, as always in research, aware that you may experience a lot of setbacks. But other than that, in my opinion, the University of Missouri, out of the places I have been, it is the one that is most supportive of these cross-disciplinary collaborations. And I think that NextGen is the proof of this.
I think that's really great. And it really speaks to, what you just talked about. So they were asking about preventions from doctors communicating with engineers. That tool that you shared that the School of Engineering has, which shows all of the research and who's doing what at the School of Engineering, would be really helpful there. And then Dr. Barron's recommendation really fits with both of these next two comments that we have. Dr. Skubic mentions that engineers are problem solvers, but first we need the problems in case clinical problems. So bring us your problems and let's see what we can do. And then the other comment is about one way to increase collaboration would be to have social events in which people can casually discuss their projects and serendipity can take place. Oxford and Cambridge in England have the so-called high table, which can be regarded as free dinners, but I think also is a great place to create collaborations. So maybe good food and beverages might also help.
Well, that's the plan. We're going to have the NextGen high table.
There we go.
So that is going to happen.
So be on the lookout for that. And then this one just came in. The biggest barrier, in my opinion, is the understanding each other's vocabulary. Also, the engineers want to know what is the most important problem that can be solved using the tools developed by engineers. So I think that those would be really great discussions at some of these social events.
Yeah.
So those are all the questions I have right now that have come in. If anybody has any last minute questions, please submit them.
All right, well, oh wait, here's one.
Yes, so you nicely presented the data acquired from lab tests and intensive care unit. Impressive results. How could you explain the impact of MI on the heart rate? Is there a mathematical modeling behind?
So I would need to share something else. So maybe I go like this and then we see. So what we have utilized well, I still have a few minutes, so maybe I can I bring that up?
Yeah.
That would be
Yes,
easier.
sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so it is an interesting question. So I will respond in two steps. So the first, it is what we actually have developed, which is not exactly what is in there. Okay, so I can share the slides. Okay. So this is about, this is actually the tracing in 3D of how the motion of the center of mass appears when you measure it with these instruments. And the problem, so the basic waveform looks something like that, with this pronounced complex that I was showing you earlier, that is called, that is referred to as IJK complex. And so this is a picture that Marge shared with me about the original suspended bed on which experiments were performed on cadavers around the 40s. Then the model, so the model that we have been interested in is actually explaining this basic IJK complex in terms of cardiovascular physiology, in order to be able to say that if we see changes in a certain way, they actually mean, for example, reduced ventricular contractility or increased peripheral resistance. Because for our clinical partners, if we just say, warning, the signal has changed, but we are not able to say why it changes or what the changes mean, then the information that we provide is useless. And so that is the mathematical modeling that we have brought in. So what was there before to explain the signal was actually the fact that this major change in direction in the signal is due to the fact that when blood is pumped out of the heart, it moves up through the aorta and then down. And this major change in direction is what gives you this basically kick in the change in the center of mass. But you see, so this model cannot be used, for example, to see the impact of myocardial infarction, because the heart is not even in the model. There is only this trunk of the aorta. And our cardiovascular physiologists know very well that our cardiovascular system is a closed loop, and something that happens in the heart actually has an impact in the artery, in the veins, and so on. So that is finally the answer to the question. What we have developed and what we have used to decipher the signal is actually a closed looped model for the cardiovascular system. So now here you see a circuit and you see an electrical circuit. So what about the flow? And that is something that we can discuss about how the electrical currents to a circuit can actually be used to describe the flow of a fluid in a network. For now, it suffices to say that we have a description of the ventricles as these generators of pressures. And then you see all these resistors and capacitors that describe here the systemic circulation, and here the pulmonary, here the pulmonary circulation, and here the cerebral circulation. So what our model is capable of predicting is how this signal is going to change if we have a decrease in the pumping function of the ventricles, for example, or an increased resistance in the periphery, or something that may happen at the level of the lungs. But we cannot ask this model to, for example, understand the relation, predict something about the relationship between the myocardial infarction with the damage to the muscular tissue and the change in heart rate, because that would require, I mean, an extension. I'm saying if this is of interest, this could be extended, but this would require explicitly modeling how the pumping action of the heart in terms of timing is related to the electrical activity. So I know that it was a long answer, but I also kind of left some time because I didn't really know where the interest of the audience was. So I am happy I could go through this, because this is also a message that I have for our clinical partners. Even if we have models for something, or we may have technology for something, it may not be exactly what you're looking for. And so, as Marge said earlier, so we are looking for problems. And even though we may not have all the solutions now, together understanding what we have, what we can adapt, or what we can build together, we can find solutions.
I think that leads in really nicely to this next question, which is, as a dermatologist, I have long wondered why we don't adapt the pressure monitoring technology for beds to prevent pressure ulcers in vulnerable patients. So again, there's an issue.
I completely agree. Yes. And also because, so for example, other studies also conducted in the lab have shown how, for example, these big complex, actually relates, its amplitude, let's say, relates to the pulse pressure. And so it would be relatively, of course, because nothing is always easy, but it would be relatively easy to monitor these these signs. Also, another thing that is related and has always kind of left me puzzled is, for example, working on the eye. Many specialists that I work with focus on factors that are local to the eye. For example, the intraocular pressure or the retinal vessels, but the eye, like the skin or like everything else, they are all combined in the same body. And so, for example, if there are problems with the respiration, then there will be problems in the O2 that is delivered to the eye. Or if there is a problem in the heart or because of hypertension or of something else, so problems that are systemic may also then affect the end organ in a way that if it is possible to monitor, I also wonder why we don't do it more. And the reason is also that in particular for this technique of the ballistocardiogram, the problems have been its repeatability and its reliability in conditions that are not controlled as in the laboratory. So this is why we are conducting the study in the intensive care unit and again and in animals. And this is again why I think it is so important what NextGen can bring to the campus and connecting all the aspects from clinical to preclinical to basic science. And we as engineers, our goal is to provide solutions that are reliable and usable.
I think that's a great way to turn it over to Dr. Barron to end and lead towards our future of having some social events and some mingling and collaborations.
Yeah, that was great. That was just really good. We need to get all the speakers to just do 30, 35-minute talks and then have the rest for question and answer. That was really a good way to do it, Giovanna. So thank you so much for that really tremendous presentation. So everyone, please join us next month for our NextGen Discovery Series when our own Dr. Elizabeth Parks will present Precision Nutrition, Optimizing Food Intake to Support Health. So I'm really looking forward to that. Dr. Parks is a professor in nutrition and exercise physiology and the associate director of the Clinical Research Center. Her research focuses on the effect of dietary macronutrients on the development of obesity-related disorders, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, and inflammation. So her presentation will be on Tuesday, January 11th, and I am hoping that will set off a whole other potential opportunity for precision nutrition mixers as well. So we have the engineering mixers, the precision nutrition mixers. The question is, are we going to try to do this thematically, or when we first start, are we just going to probably have a everyone come mixer and then we'll sort them out after that? That's probably what we're going to end up doing. But keep looking at this space. We're going to start these in no later than February, hopefully in January. So once again, thank you, Dr. Guidobani. That was terrific. Thank you, Mary, for emceeing. And we'll see you all at the next lecture. Bye-bye.